Velasco. Thank you for reading.
Manny Pacquiao, I suppose, I don't think there would be a problem for Manny. Has its share of great fights. But every once in a while, human mind can also be considered for nothing. And only here, para sa bayan.
That's the opening bell for Round by Round, presented by Eastern Communications. Mabuhay Pilipinas, welcome world. I'm Bill Velasco.
I'm Ryan Sangalia. Boyd Sison joins us later on in the show.
Ryan, there's this really lingering bad taste in the mouth about the Holyfield-Belfort fight, but it actually has grown bigger than that because of deception on the part of the promoters that all of these fights were supposed to be legit, real, particularly the last three heavyweight bouts. Isn't it a crime to misrepresent and lie to the public about your product?
It should be, right? You would think so, but then all boxing promoters would be in prison, unfortunately. But this situation here in particular, though, was egregious because I was receiving the press releases from Triller and said, no, these are sanctioned boxing fights. Evander Holyfield is being licensed to fight again. He's, the return of the champion. And then, oh, wait, this is an exhibition, as they call it. But then as we see that an exhibition is still pretty dangerous, as evidenced by Evander Holyfield basically getting beaten up at the age of 58 years old. But at the end of the day, when you put out a press release, when you inform the public that this is a sanctioned fight, that this is anything other than just, a money grab, there should be some liability. But it seems that, when boxing became known as the red light district of sports, it's almost like, authorities looked away and they lost interest. I don't recall a serious investigation into corruption in boxing since I think the George W. Bush era, when the FBI raided the top rank offices over alleged fight fixing back in the 90s. But since then, it doesn't seem like it's really high on the agenda of the federal government.
I think at the core, it's really, all the cracks and loopholes in the system. First of all, professional sport in and of itself is entertainment. You're not representing the country, you're not entering amateur competitions like the Olympics. Secondly, of course, the federal system in the United States, where each state is independent, not like most other countries. And third, the boxing organizations pretty much can go anywhere and do whatever they want. Case in point, this event was supposed to be held in California. By some miracle, Evander Holyfield, with a week and a half's notice after not having boxed for more than a decade, endangers himself and is allowed to compete in Florida. I don't know how the government can regulate this because everybody's gung-ho about freedom of speech and all their rights and that in the U.S. But I understand that even in the U.S., which is pretty tolerant of these things in celebrity boxing and all of that stuff, it raised a big stink as well.
Yeah, actually, I'm based in Florida, and the fight took place in Florida, and I was actually going to be there, except that I was busy doing literally anything else. But you're right. Yeah, I was going to be. I've been seen in some pretty shady places, but that was a bridge too far for me. But there was a case of commission shopping, where California was going to allow Oscar De La Hoya to get into the ring for an exhibition against Vitor Belfort, even though Belfort is a very large man. He was bigger than Holyfield, who was a heavyweight champion. And it makes you think, like, what kind of planet are we on that Evander Holyfield can substitute for Oscar De La Hoya? You know what I mean?
That's what I was saying. I was already shocked that it was going to be a light heavyweight fight. And then all of a sudden it becomes a heavyweight fight.
And Belfort looks like a heavyweight.
Yeah, well, Belfort was okay with it, so he comes out on top. And it's really crazy. And now all of a sudden we have calls for a Jake Paul fight, $30 million. The money's being tossed around there are really outrageous. Is this really, the trend? I mean, are we just going to keep seeing more and more of this? Is that how little content there is out there in boxing?
Well, I think it just shows the like TikTokification of boxing, so to speak. It's not
And
about
that's a
something.
technical term, right?
Yeah, that's the technical term actually.
Not being
Merriam-Webster is
talks
actually going
enough.
to have that. Yeah. So it just shows you that like it's whatever sells. Like it's like clickbait. It's the boxing version of clickbait. Like it's fast food. It's complete nonsense. It has nothing to do with the actual sport of boxing. But people like to see a car crash. They like to see a train wreck, and this is what it is. Vitor Belfort was an MMA fighter he has a 1-0 pro boxing record, if I recall correctly. And yeah, it's totally acceptable for him at 44 years old to step into a boxing ring with 58-year-old Evander Holyfield and just beat him up and then call out a YouTuber. And that was the big fight of the weekend. That was what I think more people were talking about that than they were talking about Oscar Valdez, fighting
Yeah.
against an Olympic gold medalist.
Well, our partners, Poet Season and Dennis Principe tackled that already last night. And, alam po ninyo, napakalaking kahihiyan nito kasi bago magkaroon ng pandemya, mahigit 2,000 ang boxing event sa Asia pa lang kada taon. So before the pandemic, there's boxing everywhere in Asia, particularly 2,000 plus events a year. But I don't understand really. First of all, I don't really consider this still boxing. I think it's just, it's like here in the Philippines, laban ng gagamba, you get two spiders, but they want to stick and see who kills who. So it is what the critics of boxing have been calling it. It's become a human cockfight, and it's just morbid curiosity. Mga usyoso tayo, gusto natin makakita ng panggaan, may nasagasan, may nabundol. We just want to see, like you said, car crashes and train wrecks, and there is absolutely no redeeming value in this whatsoever.
But like when I was growing up, the clown shows, people usually wear makeup on their faces. Now they just, they go boxing. But what's interesting about it is because this is what draws the views, though. This is what people like. This is what people like. Like I could never try to talk to like just regular people about boxing fights. Like I tried to mention the champion's name, but no idea. Jake Paul. Oh yeah, I know. Oh, what do you think about that Tito Ortiz versus Anderson Silva? I don't think about it actually. Thanks for asking though. So I think that it's sort of like just whatever sells, and there will be, if there's a market, there's going to be a used car salesman, who will go out there and sell it to the public. And that's why we had this card this last weekend. Only thing is, I think that they accidentally killed their market, but because you had Triller had put on the Roy Jones Mike Tyson exhibition, and it was kind of almost like redeeming because it's like, oh, these two older fighters, they showed that they can still go and they can get in good shape, and look at them.
There was some quality, and you expect a drop off.
Exactly. But now no one wants to see sad. And that's what we saw this past weekend. We didn't see the triumphant return of someone turning the hands of time. And what was eventually, really like a sparring session. It was, oh, Vitor Belfort wants to fight Jake Paul. So he beats up a guy with one arm, who probably shouldn't be allowed, to even play a boxing video game at this stage after all the wars he's been in.
Yeah, exactly. I remember we were talking about it that, Nisi mentioned that Holyfield's actually one of the few fighters who had still fought 15 rounders. So that's how far back he goes. And for him to actually come out of retirement with a week and a half's notice, it was dangerous. And then there were reports of him slurring his speech when he would be interviewed. And I'm more worried about him than boxing, because boxing is going to limp along as it always has.
Yeah, Larry Merchant said nothing's going to kill boxing, nothing's going to save boxing. And as long as there's great income inequality in this world, there's always going to be people willing to fight for their survival, and there will be an audience for people who want to see others put themselves in danger and overcome the challenges. But you're right. The one thing I would say though about Evander Holyfield is, yes, he did fight in, they should call the cruiserweight division junior heavyweight. That's how long ago he was the champion.
Yes.
But he's always sort of had that Southern kind of, he's from Mobile, Alabama, I believe. Like he has that Southern kind of drawl. So it's hard to tell really, like what is the impact. I'm not even trying to make fun of it, but it's just I remember him talking like that like 30 years ago too. So I'm just trying to like be a little bit fair in terms of his speech, but you're right though. My other concern is not just that he's taken a lot of punches, and this we're talking about 20 years ago. When I was in high school, I remember he was New York suspended him for the beating he took against Larry Donald. He was getting beaten up so bad by Larry Donald, who was not this ferocious, heavyweight destroyer. And it was so bad that they had to suspend his license to protect him from himself. Now, all these years later, somehow he's allowed to get back in the ring. And what was even sadder is that he had shoulder issues for a long time. So not only was he um, going in there as a diminished fighter, perhaps not just from age, but also cognitively, because of how many punches he's taken. But he couldn't defend himself because his bread and butter punch was that left hook counter, and he tried it once and fell over and out of the ring. It was really sad to watch, and I think that whoever was responsible for putting that together did a disservice to boxing.
And so it is, week after week. Since we're on the topic of pretend boxing, Ryan and I are going to show you our brief, very hand-picked list of what we consider as some of the most compelling, great boxing movies of all time. I think Ryan should go first.
Me? Okay. I'm gonna go first because a lot of people asked me this, what are your favorite boxing movies of all time? And the one answer that I think surprises people is I tell everyone, if you want to the realest movie ever made about boxing to me was The Great White Hype. Now it was a satire from the mid-90s starring Damon Wayans as an undefeated heavyweight champion, but he's having a hard time finding compelling matchups. And so this promoter, who's played by Samuel L. Jackson, he has to, and he's sort of like a Don King character, kind of like, that used car salesman type of mentality. They're trying to find a white contender to face him because they're saying, listen, the biggest heavyweight championship fight of all time was Larry Holmes against Jerry Cooney. Why can't we do this again? And then there are no suitable white contenders, so they find the one guy who had beaten him as an amateur, who happened to be white. And it's so over the top. There's Jamie Foxx, plays the manager of the number one contender, whom Damon Wayans' character is ducking. He's at his comedic best in this. Just the corruption, it's like the cartoonish villainy that goes into putting together a boxing fight. It might as well be a documentary. So I love that one.
So basically what you're saying, this is a spoof of Rocky.
It's a spoof of like everything that we go through every day in boxing. We're so conditioned by how like cartoonishly like corrupt boxing is that like
Yes.
we don't realize if you look at it, it's hilarious. If it's the lack of shame that we see in boxing, basically put to a Benny Hill soundtrack.
So basically, it's so tragic, it's funny.
Yes, yeah, you have to laugh. Another one of my, I know it's funny. I actually saw that movie in theaters as like a kid. I was like 8 years old or something like that. Another movie that I really enjoyed about boxing was that kind of flew under the radar. It's based on one of my favorite books ever by Jack Newfield. It's called Don King Only in America. The book is called,
I love Ving Rhames in it.
Oh, Ving Rhames really played a very good Don King there, and it's so funny because the title of the book really sums up what the movie's about: the life and crimes of Don King.
Exactly.
And this is like it chronicles Don King's story coming from being a street criminal in Cleveland, going to prison, coming out, getting involved in boxing, and his unique set of skills, cultivated from running the numbers racket in Cleveland, being involved in organized crime, and then going to prison and not serving time, but having time serve him, when he was serving a prison sentence for manslaughter. It really encapsulates everything that Don King is about. Darius McCrary who we know as Eddie Winslow. He plays Muhammad Ali. I always thought that was kind of funny. Cliff Kozer, who is a heavyweight fringe contender, he plays Mike Tyson. He continued that role to the rest of his life, pretending to be like Mike Tyson, basically. Even gets a tattoo on his face and real, very strange guy, but he looks the part in this movie. Very good, very well done. Jack Newfield, was one of my heroes in boxing journalism, and the third movie that I'm gonna mention is the Cinderella Man. Now, I'm not just
Oh,
saying
yeah.
that because I happen to be from 2 towns away from where Cinderella Man, James Braddock, is from. I'm from Cliffside Park. He's from North Bergen, New Jersey. But it's just I love the book first off by Jeremy Schaap. He does a great job really putting together the times of the Great Depression, and then the movie really shows just that time period of how difficult it was for Jim Braddock, who's really a hard luck guy, a lot of hand problems, was on relief during the Great Depression, and becomes this great inspiring story, winning the heavyweight championship only a few blocks away from where I used to live in Woodside, Queens. So I have a lot of connection to that movie, and for me, that's why it was special.
And it's also interesting to note even the little details, like he had the wooden teeth because he had so many teeth missing, and the real absolute squalor that they lived in, the fan base he generated from all the masses because he was literally one of them.
Yeah, he was really a feel good story in a time when a lot of people didn't have a lot to feel good about. But I thought that it was just very well done. Russell Crowe really put a lot of work into taking on that role. The one issue I have with it is the portrayal of Max Baer as this
Yes.
villain, and I thought that it didn't need that. I thought that Max, yeah, I mean, obviously it's the easy thing to do to have this good guy against bad guy story. Even though if people who've read the Cinderella Man book will know that Jim Braddock wasn't like this
He was
man.
not a saint.
Yeah, there was one story where like he punches out the chief of police or something from North Bergen, New Jersey, because he made fun of his brother. There was like, he was kind of a crazy guy. He was a boxer, so to speak. So but Max Baer was not like that. Max Baer was this kind of lovable guy, very funny. He I remember like I think his last words were when he was dying of a heart attack, where someone asked, is there a house doctor here? It's like, no, I want a people doctor. And then he died, unfortunately. But yeah, I think that's just the kind of guy that Max Baer was. And I thought that they sort of did a disservice by doing the kind of cheesy Hollywood thing.
All right. Now I've seen so many boxing movies throughout the years. But first on my list, of course, is Rocky, because that sort of propelled, this whole interest in boxing. And it covered a different era. For some of you guys probably weren't alive yet. It's the whole US bicentennial and all of that. The same thing. Let's find some schlub somewhere, yung talagang kawa-awa tao, gawin natin yung heavyweight contender. It was basically a charity move that backfired. Plus, of course, what Sylvester Stallone went through to do that movie. They were just given plywood to nail together as dressing rooms in the freezing cold in Philadelphia. He had to sell his dog and all of that, and then it does big at the Oscars. So for me, more for what it has done for the genre. Plus, of course, it's a damn good film. The second one on my list is Million Dollar Baby, which in more recent times brings to light what's really going on in boxing, not just from how hard it is to become successful in boxing, how much you have to sacrifice, but also behind the scenes, like Hilary Swank's character when she gets paralyzed, all of a sudden the relatives are all there. Everybody's trying to milk what they can out of her before she dies or if she recovers, and then the mercy killing at the hands of her trainer Clint Eastwood. And again, did very well with the critics, did very well, with awards and all of that. So that was, for me, those two were very, very big. One of my favorites, of course, is Raging Bull. This movie was the only sports film in Time Magazine's list of 100 greatest films. And of course, this was a while back, but still, for it to do that, tells you something about the story overriding the fact that it's a quote-unquote sports movie. At alam ko ninyo, ang dami pong magandang nangyari dito sa pelikula ito. At hindi po nila pinapogi yung bida. You know, they didn't make Jake LaMotta a nice guy. I mean, he was a real jerk. You know, he would hurt people. He was mean. In other words, they did not make him a hero. You know, they portrayed him as he was. The film was black and white. Robert De Niro, lost so much weight and put on so much weight for the later years when Jake LaMotta was running a nightclub. His rivalry with Sugar Ray Robinson, the realism with which they did the fights, of course, with a lot of creative lighting, so they wouldn't have to show the crowds. But that was the style back then, and it's one of those rare films where they really went out on a limb to do it their way, and they hit a home run.
You know what's funny is that I remember hearing Jake LaMotta. Someone asked him like, "Oh wow, like were you really that bad as a person?" And he was like, "No, I was worse." The book that it's based on is really amazing, and it actually starts off with him talking about like it has one of the best openings of a book. Like it talks about like how he it's like so there was this bookie named and like he talks about like jumping a bookie. That's like the name the beginning of that the story in the book, and it just there's so much there that it's very raw, and I just love that it's not just one of the best boxing movies. I think it's probably the best boxing movie of all time. It's one of the best movies of all time. I loved how they built the rings. They made it at sometimes rectangular, and it just showed the dimensions, and it's almost like you get lost in the cinematography of it. And the Sugar Ray Robinson, the St. Valentine's Day massacre scene, I love that so much because just the way you have the smoke behind him, and it's just surreal. And LaMotta, De Niro's just getting beaten around the ring, and he never knocked me down. It was so well done. It was like this movie masterpiece that just happened to involve boxing.
All right, so that's our short list. We should do like 3 hours of this.
Oh yeah, no, yeah. I could tell we both have this great passion for both boxing movies and film. So, there are a lot of bad movies. Don't get me wrong, but when the boxing movies are done well, they're really done well.
And now we go on to our Eastern Communications fearless fighter of the day. Ryan, who you got?
I'm going with Anderson the Spider Silva. Yes, the former UFC champion. For some reason, two UFC fighters were fighting in a boxing match, Anderson Silva and Tito Ortiz. Now, why I say he's a fearless fighter is because there's not going to be a more resistant person to wearing a mask or doing a COVID precautions than Tito Ortiz. So Anderson Silva had to get up close and personal in order to punch him, and he punched him a few times and knocked him out in the first round. And to the extent that I understand, didn't catch COVID. Did it in Florida, in a state where it's really out of control with the pandemic. So for that, I'm going to say that Anderson Silva is a pretty fearless guy.
All right, that's our fearless fighter of the day presented by Eastern Communications. At ngayon mga kaibigan, aming kasamang si Boy at Season ay pag-uusapan niya yung hindi natuloy, yung naudlot na laban ni Muhammad Ali at ni Wilt Chamberlain. Tandaan po natin si Muhammad Ali kinikilalang pinakamagaling na heavyweight champion ng kasaysayan at si Wilt Chamberlain ang pinakamalakas na manlalaro sa kasaysayan ng NBA. Boyet?
Thank you, Bill and Ryan. Oy, mga ka-rounders, naalala nyo ba na nabanggit ko noong isang linggo tungkol kay Muhammad Ali at kay Wilt Chamberlain, di ba? Okay, ngayon, noong unang panahon, medyo matagal na rin yun, no? Ay gusto ni Wilt Chamberlain na makalaban si Muhammad Ali para sa kanyang heavyweight title. That was about 1967 when, for the first time, there appeared to be a prospect for this encounter to be reality. Well, at that time, hindi naging hinog, kumbaga, yung pagkakataon. And due to a lot of different reasons, the fans never got to witness it. Then, in 1971, there opened a possibility that this would happen at the legendary Madison Square Garden. Na mga kaibigan, dito naganap at patuloy na nagaganap ang napakadaming mga concert, basketball games, pati na rin mga memorable na mga boxing bouts tulad ng mga laban nila Joe Louis at Rocky Marciano noong 1951, ang dalawang laban nila Joe Frazier at Muhammad Ali noong 1971 at 1974 before the Thriller in Manila, ang pagtutuos nila Lennox Lewis at Evander Holyfield in 1999, at noong 2019, bago magpandemya, ang laban nila Andy Ruiz at Anthony Joshua. Kumbaga sa Pilipinas, mga kaibigan, ang Madison Square Garden ay ang kanilang Araneta Coliseum. Ngayon, isang American TV network ang nagplano nitong idea na ito. Makatapos na makailang beses na pag-uusap, diskurso, napapayag lang si Muhammad Ali dahil sa laki ng halaga ng pera na ihinihain sa kanya. Ito siguro ay dahil na rin sa pangangailangan ni Muhammad Ali dahil sa pagtanggal na kanyang lisensya ng 3 taon sa pagboboxing, bunsod ng pagtangging mag-draft at lumaban sa Vietnam War. Now si Chamberlain, who was 35 years old at that time, already had 2 NBA championships, 4 NBA MVP awards, and was just a year away from retiring from the NBA after 13 seasons, with more than 70 NBA records under his name. The stilt stood at 7 feet 2 inches and weighed about 275 pounds. Si Ali naman was around 29 years old in 1771 and had a 31-0 record with 25 knockouts to his name. The Mouth from the South stood at 6'3". Pero Chamberlain was approximately 60 pounds heavier than Ali. Ngayon, isa sa mga kinuha ni Chamberlain para tumulong sa kanyang training ay, wala nyo, si Cas de Amato. Matulog yung pangalan, di ba? Cas de Amato readily volunteered to prepare Chamberlain for the bout. De Amato is the one responsible for the success of Floyd Patterson, who at age 21 became the youngest heavyweight titleist in history, which was a record that stood for decades until it was broken by another Cas de Amato protege, Iron Mike Tyson. Cas de Amato let Tyson watch his collection of about 4,000 fight films that molded Tyson into being the feared fighter that he was throughout his career. Now, sabi ni Cas de Amato na with proper coaching, Will Chamberlain could utilize his overwhelming size advantage to secure the victory. Now, the strategy was to use the long jab to prevent Ali from landing damaging shots. Now, if Chamberlain could jab effectively, it would give him the space to land blows outside of Ali's range. And if Wilt landed enough shots, Chamberlain would win a decision simply based on the punch count. Punch count, ha? Yung bilang ng mga suntok na malaland ni Will Chamberlain. Now, sabi ni Bob Adams sa libro na yon ni Tom Hauser that on the day of the press conference, nag-aantay si Ali. Nung pumasok na si Chamberlain, sumigaw daw si Ali ng timber! Alam niyo ibig sabihin, no? Parang puno na babaksak. Yung mga Amerikano gano'n, no? Pag nagpuputol ng puno, sisigaw sila ng timber para yung mga tao na sa paligid, lalayo, who will find a better spot so that hindi sila mababagsakan ng punong babagsak. Now, sabi din ni Arum, si Chamberlain apparently turned white. He went into the next room with his lawyer, and then his lawyer comes out and says to everybody else in the other room, hindi na daw siya lalaban. Naintimidate pa kaya si Chamberlain? So, yun ang kwento. Yun ang kwento. So, mga ka-rounders, may mga kuro-kuro ba kayo? Send us your comments about this feature on the Round by Round Facebook page. Next week, marami pa akong kikwento sa inyo tungkol sa celebrity boxing. But in the meantime, back to Bill and Ryan.
Thanks, Boyet. And that's today's edition of Round by Round, presented by Eastern Communications. I'm Bill Velasco.
And I'm Ryan Sangalia. We're on Facebook at 6 p.m. Monday through Friday and on our YouTube channel at 7 p.m. So like, follow, share, and subscribe now.
At sa ayaw po ninyo at sa gusto ninyo, you will have Boyet Season, Dennis Principe, and Missy Casiano answering the bell tomorrow. Catch them on the next episode of Round by Round. All boxing, all Filipino, all the time. See you.